as I kiss.
Hello and welcome to Living Legendary Podcast with Baby Nigel and Sham. Normally it's Lady Sham and Baby Nigel, but I'm going to do the intro this time. Hello, everybody. Listeners, Sham, say hello.
Hello, everybody. I'm here. It's just that today we have a very special guest, and prior to going on, I said, you know what? Nigel needs to do the intro.
So Sham is a bit flustered because she loves punk rock, and I do too. And our host is a legendary punk rocker, Don Bolles from The Germs.
And other bands, too. He's from Nervous Gender, 45 Grave, and Celebrity Skin. And he's just an amazing man who's an incredible musician. He's a drummer, isn't he?
He's a drummer. He's also in a handful of other bands, which I'll let him name.
Okay.
I know them, but Hammered Satin, a ton of other groups, but...
Basically, you guys, he's a punk rock legend.
I believe they're one of the first punk bands, if not the very first punk band to come out of Los Angeles. And he's going to be sitting with us and talking about his career.
I'm so excited. These are the kind of conversations that are truly legendary, because hopefully Don is going to paint a picture for you of what it was like to be a punk rocker in the early 80s and late 70s in Los Angeles, which is a time long gone.
Hello.
Don, you're on the air with Sham and Nigel.
Hi, Don.
Oh, that's great.
We're so excited to have you, Don. I can't believe you're here.
Yeah, well, I'm not. I'm here. Oh.
Yes,
Wait,
physically you're
I'm
you're in Los Angeles, right, Don?
Yes, I'm here talking to all of you people or whoever's listening to the miracle of telephonic.
And you're in the city of Los Angeles, are you?
No, I'm actually in 40 feet south of the exclusively industrial city of Vernon.
Oh, that sounds exciting.
In Huntington Park.
Vernon. What's Vernon like?
Yeah. It's exclusively industrial. It's like only 60 people live there, and they have to vote for the way that the people who run Vernon, that very corruptly, I might add, and have done so for many years, want them to vote, or they don't get to live there.
I see. Well, Dawn, we have so many questions for you. I mean, my first question is really, what are you doing in Vernon? But honestly, I think we need to go a little further back than that.
So, Don, I'm going to just start this segment here. Before you went on, we were talking about the bands that you were in: 45 Grave, The Germs, etc., Hammered Satin. What other groups were you in? Could you just name them? I mean, if there's like a million of them, don't name them. But if there's a just give us a taste of all the bands you've been in.
All right. Well, let me give that a shot. See, well, I guess I was in top 40 bands when I was, a kid, because I could sound like the grown-ups on the radio. And so the older kids let me be in their bands, and I'd play the high schools while I was still in grade school with these guys. And it's pretty weird. The older kids, I think I told you this, but I'll mention it again. We're from Scottsdale, Arizona, and one of the older kids I was in a band with, he had a wonderful old 50-something melody maker, but he had another friend of ours kill another friend of ours for a bad pot deal in Mexico.
Kill as in murder?
Yeah. And so one guy's dead, and then the other two are in jail for the rest of their lives because they didn't do such a good job of hiding it.
Wow, Don. So you got off to an interesting start. But you're from Arizona? Is that where you were born?
Straight out of Scottsdale.
Scottsdale's so nice now. What was it like when you grew up there?
Well, I actually was born in Oakland at the county hospital to parents unknown still to me. I have no idea who or what they were. But then I moved to Scottsdale because I had bad lungs. How come you hold on, Don? How come you never knew your parents? What happened? Well, I just I was pretty young, and we didn't have a lot in common, probably.
But I mean, did they raise you?
For adoption.
Oh, they gave you up for adoption. So you were adopted.
What they told me, what the adoptive parents told me, which I think might very well be, bull hooey, but who knows? Was that one of them was a famous magazine publisher, and the other one was a famous opera singer, the lady. And I always assumed it was Hugh Hefner and Maria Callas, but I could be wrong.
Well, I don't think they'd be in Scottsdale, but that
was Oakland. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you end up in Scottsdale?
I ran away from home and hitchhiked when I was 2. No, just kidding. But my parents, my adopted parents, took me there because the doctors, that's what they would do if you had bad lungs back then. They'd go to Arizona.
Yeah, you want to go somewhere. You want to go somewhere dry. I had asthma when I grew up, and it was the same thing. Go to Palm Springs, and it'll clear up.
I was always excused from PE, which was nice.
Yeah, you and I are the same on that one.
Excellent. That's great. And wasn't it great? I mean, I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, who wants to run a mile in 120-degree weather?
No, but they did make me walk the mile, just so, because they had a quota of something. You had to do it. So they just made me walk it, which was fine. I used to hang out with these giant red ants that had colonies on the playground. I didn't really talk to people as much, and I was really fascinated by these ants.
Did you have a lot of friends as a kid in school? What were you like?
A lot of ant friends, yeah.
A lot of ants, okay. And when did you leave Scottsdale and head to Los Angeles?
They were all girls, all the ants. All the ones you see are girls, except for the drones who just live to procreate with the queen and then die. But anyway, it's an interesting society. But I had bands in Scottsdale and Phoenix. I had the terrible top 40 bands, but I sang nice. One of them was called Tube Steak, and we got away with that because people were still kind of naive about double entendres.
What year was this, Don?
That was probably 68.
68. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I was like the target audience for bubblegum music. I was 12 in 1968.
So what was popular in 1968, like the Beatles?
Well, 1969 was the year of bubblegum, and yes, the Beatles were very popular, and in fact, a couple of my friends and I really enjoyed collecting clues to, whether Paul was dead or not, and that was a real thing. Then the Beatles were good when they went psychedelic, especially, and I loved the psych stuff, right? Like the Red Crayola and Pink Floyd, early Pink Floyd with Sid Barrett, loved all that stuff. And then, of course, I got into John Cage and Karl-Heinz Stockhausen when I was like 10. And that was the ultimate at that time.
Hey, Don, just quickly, let's talk about Paul McCartney. So do you think that's real or no?
Well, I don't know.
Hold on, back up. What is Paul McCartney? What is that?
Let me just do this real quick. So, as Don said, is Paul dead? There's we'll say conspiracy. There's a thing going around that.
Well, there's a book, and Paul
you say
McCartney
it.
Actually has something to do with that book.
So there's a conspiracy that Paul McCartney was dead?
Apparently, there was a time where he was in a car accident, and if you look at album covers, it says, "Here lies Paul." You say it because you know what's going on.
Well, apparently he was replaced by a guy named Billy Shears, and who bore a resemblance to him and such, and they kept it kind of hush-hush, sort of, but let clues out. And there's a book written by Billy Shears that's out now. And my friend Jimmy Hay, who's like a great DJ, I had him. He DJ'd at my club Screwball, and just the best DJ. But he believes that it's totally real, and I don't know. But he also believed QAnon was real when that first came out.
So again, just going back to it, really what it comes down to is, at least what I was understanding as that when Paul McCartney, as they say, passed away, that they didn't want to have mass suicide, a bunch of teenagers freaking out that Paul McCartney passed away, that they said, oh no, he's fine, he's fine.
So they just got some other dude.
They got a lookalike. Again, this is going into the weeds a bit, but...
And by the way, this is all allegedly?
Yeah, we're not saying that this is true or not. This is just... it's a legend. It's a legendary... You're on a legendary podcast. This is a legend. Urban legend. Urban legend. Continue, Don. Continue.
Urban legend for us.
So, Don, when did you end up in Los Angeles? What year did you go there?
Well, I was doing these top 40 bands, right? And I was in these weird bands like the Meatloaf Cigarettes and Speed Orchestra, and and I had I don't know. I tried to start a punk band. Well, I did start a punk band because I wasn't good enough to play in the one punk band that existed in Phoenix, and were my friends, and were amazing, by the way. Get their record on In the Red Records. They were called The Consumers.
What year did you start seeing punk in Scottsdale? What year did you did that start?
I was into what became punk before it was called punk, except by Lester Bangs, you know. But we had to go to L.A. to get those records, and they were few and far between.
And was
here.
this still the late '60s or like the?
No, this is like the early mid '70s, like '74. 75, etc. And then finally, you know, the New York Dolls were around, the Ramones, you know, and the Ramones wanted to be glam, but glam was too difficult for them to play, so they decided to base their whole shtick on bubblegum, which was not as tough to play, but, you know, very satisfying.
Were they more on the East Coast?
Yeah.
Okay.
They were on the East
and
Coast.
You were sort of starting the scene here on the West Coast.
Yeah, I mean, sort of. So I'm in the band, and so I couldn't play in the Consumers. So what I did was I had two of my friends that were in my top 40 band. This guy Dale B. Sorry, who played guitar, and this guy John E. Precious, who played drums. I had them switch instruments so they could suck as badly as I did on the bass guitar, which I had just started playing. So we sounded pretty unified. We were called the Liars, and then this was around when a guy named Don Bolles got murdered in his car because he was a reporter who got a little too close to the truth behind some land fraud issues and the mafia dealings. So that was like a big story in Phoenix. Anyway, I'm in this band, The Liars. Then we changed the name to Crazy Homicide when Rob Graves came from Detroit to join the band after I played him 2 songs that we recorded in our living room live over the phone. He's like, I'll be right there. So he came out and joined us on rhythm guitar. He was like an actual musician. And we had this other band. The first thing I ever put out on a record, actually, it was called the Yvonne, and we were an improvisational pop band, and we made up a whole set of songs from a bunch of song titles that were like horror, shibboleth movies from the 50s. You know, but it was the first thing that I had put on record. It came out on an LA Free Music Society compilation called Blubcrad, like when I moved to LA. So Rob and I joined this other band, the Exterminators, and I played bass before, sort of. I was terrible. But the Exterminators didn't need a bass player or a guitar player or a singer, the things I could do, but they did need a drummer. So I borrowed what passed for a drum set that my friends had loaned me, but which they didn't want to because I destroyed everything I ever played drum-wise back then. And I auditioned for them, and they were younger kids. They were really good, and it sounded like the Raw Power album played on 45, that band. And Rob Graves joined on bass when their bass player got grounded or something. And so we were in a band together. I was playing drums, he was playing bass, and then. But anyway, my Crazy Homicide band and the Exterminators both broke up when Rob and I got sick to death of only 10 people going to our shows and 9 of them being in the band that were playing. So we moved to L.A. as soon as I got a trust fund check because my dad was in the military and he died. And the trust fund check was $2,000-something bucks. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to move to L.A. So we drove to L.A. and I was going to join the Germs. I had talked to them on the phone and told them I was going to come out and play drums, and I'd been playing for like a month and a half. And they're like, okay, Pat and Darby, you know, they're like, yeah, okay, that's cool. I had just gotten the Forming single. And, you know, Becky Barton, or Donna Rhea, as she was known, was playing these, you know, really simple drum parts that Pat taught her. And I thought this was going to be a piece of cake. So I get to L.A., and I go to the Mask benefit. The Germs were playing, and they had Nicky D.
Stop. We got to talk about the Mask. I'm so glad you mentioned that. But first, just to give a perspective, what year was this that you drove out there?
Okay, so this was 77.
77. Okay.
78.
Now, everybody remember the Mask. The Mask was
February
an underground...
78.
And the Mask was an incredible underground space where...
A literally underground space. It was in a basement.
And it was in a basement. I've been there, Don.
Yeah.
You know what it is now? It's World of Wonder, the production company that does RuPaul's Drag Race. And they kept the basement with all the graffiti and everything. It was,
they have all the graffiti and stuff.
Yeah,
I've been in there.
It was incredible. But it's still a space. It's on Hollywood Boulevard in Cherokee. And it's this big, giant building. And you have to literally go to the basement. But basically, they had these incredible incredible punk shows, and Dawn was a huge part of that. So Dawn, I'm so...
Well, they did it until January '78 when the police made them stop, and then they had to have private parties, and they were a rehearsal space too, so we'd hang out there. But anyway, so I moved here with Rob. First night, we go to the plunger pit and change into our punk gear after our drive from Phoenix. We go to the masked benefit because it was at the Elks Lodge downtown, and all the bands were playing. Every one of them, the Screamers, the Weirdos, the Dills, every band was
So
playing.
the Mask was like one of the first places. The Mask was one of the first places you went in LA.
It was. I went there when I first visited LA during punk years, and I met these guys, the Naughty Women, a band from Orange County, who were amazing at the time for sure. Outside, you had to enter through the alley in the back and go down all these stairs. But so by the time I got back, the Mask was no longer a functioning venue, just a rehearsal space and a hangout, and private parties, which were the same as shows. So I go to the benefit, and then I see the Germs play. And Nicky Beat, I don't know if you know this, but he was in the Weirdos, and they were borrowing him on drums, and the Weirdos were not happy with him moonlighting with the Germs. So he wanted to not do that, and that's why they were glad that I was coming out to play drums for him, sight unheard, But I thought it was going to be like the Donneria Germs, like the Forming single. Well, Nicky had taken them already by this time to the Lexicon Devil EP area, and he was good. And so I'm like watching this going, ruh-roh, this is not going to be quite as easy as I thought. But the next day, in the morning, Rob Graves and I went to the Canterbury Apartments, which was just up Cherokee and across Hollywood Boulevard from the Mask. And this guy that ran the place was a black guy, was sort of a community activist from South Central, and he would rent to people with blue hair, and nobody else would. And it was pretty cheap. I mean, my room was $130 a month, and I think Wygar, from Zolarx, who I had on my radio show yesterday on WFMU, he got a room there for $150 a month on the 4th floor. I was on the 3rd floor. But every band, there were at least one or two people from that band that lived at the Canterbury. There was Lorna and Belinda had an apartment on the 4th floor. I lived with Buzzy Murder, who was the guitar player from the Exterminators. Don, he was 16.
When you say Belinda Carlisle?
Belinda Carlisle.
Yeah, from the Go-Go's.
She was supposed to be the first drummer of the Germs, but she said she got mono and then got her friend Becky to do it. And Becky, who changed her name to Donneria, got a drum set by telling her grandma that she had leukemia. And so her grandma felt sorry for her and bought her a drum set. But yeah, so there I was. I didn't even get to audition for the Germs right away, but I would hang around the Mask pretty much every day. Like things like Joan Jett and her girlfriend Lisa, who was gorgeous, they'd be on like downers and drunk and just screaming at each other and pulling each other's hair and beating each other up. It was like crazy. But
and was
really
the Runaways
cool.
Was the Runaways like already formed and
they
going?
Had pretty much broken up by then. But,
okay.
Yeah.
So they were kind of
Joan
on the
was
end.
cool. She had parties like all the time at her duplex, which was across San Vicente, and it was like near San Vicente and Sunset, right across from the Whiskey a Go Go, pretty much.
Were they
there were
still
parties out there all the time?
Were they still involved with Kim Fowley?
To some degree, they still thought fondly of him.
For those of our listeners that don't know, Kim Fowley is the person that started.
LA.
Yeah, he started the Runaways, and he formed the band with Joan Jett and all the girls, and basically he created the band.
Steele was in it too at first, and then he was actually a founding member of the Mothers of Invention too. And
I didn't know that.
And Frank wanted him to stay in the band, but he said, "No, I got to do my own stuff." That Kim Fowley was one of the people that was, made me want to live in L.A.
He was incredible. He passed away. He came to one of my first art shows. My first art show was actually at World of Wonder, that same production company, the building. They have a space next door, and they would have art shows there. But Don,
what was that space called? It was like
it was just attached to the whole production company. But Don, like, take us through from there. How did you end up in the Germs? Because you said you had to audition, but how did you actually like end up in the band?
Well, so one day, finally, all the drums were there, and they wanted to see if I could actually play drums. And when I was at that Elks Lodge the mass benefit show, it was funny. Everyone from every band, like, there were no drummers in L.A. Like, you didn't have to play drums. You could play guitar or sing. You didn't have to sit in the back. You know, it was punk rock. So, but these guys were all, they'd never heard me either. But Robbie Poshboy, you know, and F Word, and the Craig Lee, I think, in the bag. All these people were like saying, "You got to join our band. We have label interest and management. The germs are going nowhere. They're a joke. Nobody takes them seriously. They're terrible." And I'm like, "Well, you haven't heard me play. I'm pretty terrible. And anyway, I don't want to be in your band with label interest and management. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm just here to join the germs, whatever." And so anyway, finally, first Tat taught me the songs on bass and guitar, so I could, you know, and that's how I learned them on drums. You know, just sort of I put all that together in my head and figured out the drum parts. Plus, I had tapes of Nicky rehearsing with him, and Nicky gave me 2 drum lessons. He taught me how to play "Life of Crime" by the Weirdos, "Lexicon Devil," and "Circle One." And then I told him, I didn't remember this. He reminded me recently. Said, "Yeah, remember when you said you couldn't take drum lessons from me anymore?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, huh?" And he goes, "Yeah, you said that if you got it any better, that it wouldn't be punk."
Wow.
So I thought, oh, that was pretty cool, I guess.
Hey, Don.
So I set up my drum set in the bathroom of the Mask in this, like, liquid that was a composite of beer and urine and water where the toilet used to be. And I banged around on the drums for a minute, and then Darby and Pat are like, "Could you, like, play a song, maybe?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay." And I just learned "Life of Crime" by the Weirdos, so I played that. And then they went out in the hallway outside, and Geza was out there, Geza X. He was the sound guy at the Mask. And then they said, "Well, what do you think?" "Well, I don't know. What do you think?" Well, and Geza said, "Well, he did come all the way from Phoenix to join your band. That's got to count for something." And so Darby comes back in with Pat and Lorna following, and he said, "Oh, you're a germ." You know, that was pretty fun. Interesting.
Hey, Don, I'm going to just jumpstart and go like years and years in the future, which is where we are now. So just going back to that, Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers says you are the best punk rock drummer. So like the greatest. That's the quote.
Yes.
The story you just told to where we are now, 2023, where Flea is giving you praise. Can you just talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, well, you know, I love his name, too. I love to say it, you know, because it could mean a couple different things. When you go, "Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers," you know, it's like, they're almost upon us. Quickly, Flea. But anyway, he's a good musician, and so is John Frusciante. We just saw them perform in Las Vegas recently, and, you know, gosh, John Frusciante and Flea and that drummer guy, Will Ferrell, was it? Oh, no, but he looked like him.
Yeah, it's a look-alike.
They were jamming together real nice.
You know, funny
cool.
enough, I just bought his signature snare, the Chad Smith snare, off Craigslist.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
It's from Pearl, so it's like discontinued, but it's a Chad Smith snare. Anyways.
You know what I ended up with, and I didn't know what it was until one day I looked at it, and I'd had it for a while, and I'm like, holy, you know what, Batman, this is a 1964 Ludwig Acrolite snare in perfect condition that I've been playing all these years. No wonder it sounds so good. You know, it sounded just as good as the Supraphonic, which was the snare that the most hit records were done with at that time, and the Acrolite was second.
John Bonham was a big adopter of the Ludwig snare, and
they were good. They sound great. The reason that I was so great, or whatever it is because I wasn't that great at playing. I was not very great at that. But the guys I listened to were gods. You know, like the drummer from Vandergraaf Generator, Guy Evans, or Phil Collins when he was in Brand X, and Ainsley Dunbar in The Mothers of Invention, and you know, Bill Ward, of course, and et cetera. So, you know, the guys I listened to were the tits. And just my terrible version of these guys really trumped these other drummers' great versions of, like, the New York Dolls and Sex Pistols guys.
So what you're saying is that your taste was more important than the execution.
Oh, yeah. I didn't really have – I wasn't very good at playing, but I was convincing. And I couldn't play drums, but I could play songs. And that really, you know, served me pretty well.
Don, I really want to ask you about Darby Crash. Those of you that don't know, Darby Crash was the lead singer of the Germs, and he died apparently by committing suicide by overdosing on heroin in 1980.
Early fentanyl.
Oh, geez. I mean, I can't imagine.
But he knew. I mean, it wasn't an accident.
So what? So you said he knew it wasn't an accident, so he was trying to commit suicide, because that's what my research told me. But what was that like? Because wasn't it like the Germs were just sort of taking off, and then suddenly the lead singer dies? Like, what was that like? And
well, it was kind of a little more complicated than that. We were banned basically by the time we were recording the album that people called GI. It was actually just supposed to be called the Germs. It was not called GI. We put the GI on there because we thought we were going to have to use that to stand for Germs Incognito, because any club that would dare to book us and advertise us got threatening phone calls from the LAPD saying they would get shut down permanently if they had us play.
Wow.
So we were banned from playing any venue in LA for years.
Why were you seen as so dangerous?
Well, I don't, because Darby was like, he was like this dervish Jesus Christ rabble rouser of like a shaman, you know, kind of. And he was so powerful because he didn't fear death. In fact, he welcomed it. He thought it would be pretty cool. He was super smart, too. I never heard him raise his voice in anger, except like once or twice at a show, and they wouldn't let us play, and they shut us off. And they're too damaged. They're not letting us play. Now that was about it, you know.
Almost like inciting riots, kind of a bit of riot, or what?
Kind of. It wasn't your standard riot. It was more like a rite, like a weird shamanic dervish ritual. These shows, they weren't about music. They weren't about fashion. They were about like freeing your mind, soul, whatever it is. And Darby was like I don't know if you know, but I mean you could probably guess. He was unlike pretty much anyone else. He was sort of a Jesus, not, I wouldn't say Hitler, you know, but he was a Jesus Manson leader, Bengali, you know, like he not in any mean way or weird way, but he was amazed at his personal power. He would just ask someone for their amazing leather jacket, "Can I have that?" And they'd go, "Yeah." Like even the people that didn't like him or were violently opposed to Darby Crash wanted him to love them.
How did you feel about him personally, and how was your relationship with him?
He was one of the smartest, most interesting the people I had ever met. He didn't know anything. Neither of these guys really cared about outside music. They did not care. They liked pop music. Like Pat had pictures of like Christy Brinkley and Farrah Fawcett Majors and all, really supermodels and stuff on his walls. He loved Yes, and he loved Queen and David Bowie. And Darby, I found this out in my phone calls to them from Arizona, and Darby loved oldies because his sister would go out with Cholo guys, and he also loved Bowie and Queen too. And like Pat loved Steve Howe's guitar playing because, as he said, he didn't have a trace of blues in his style. And he also loved Steve Hufstetter from The Quick.
Are you still in touch with Pat Smear now? And
I talked to him
what's
today.
he up to? Really? You talked to him today? What did you guys talk about?
Well, he sent me a picture from a bunch of the people from the Dick Denny Memorial thing that I missed, unfortunately. Dick Denny was a real sweetheart. He was like the Keith, Keith Richards of L.A. in a way. You know, not just because of
Tell
drugs
us who he is. I don't even know who that is.
That kind of presence.
Who's Dick Denny?
And his brother John Denny, along with this guy Cliff Roman and Nicky B, the drummer, made up a band called The Weirdos. And it was an amazing band. They were art students, and so they had a look that could kill. And their music was pretty good, too, certainly at first. They were one of the bigger bands, and people thought they were going to get signed and make money with punk rock. I mean, the Germs, we knew better. No radio station would ever play that album. I mean, a couple did, but rarely did they ever play it. It would never sell. So we knew that it wasn't about money. We didn't care about the music biz. We didn't care about money, anything like that.
Don, sorry, quickly.
Yeah.
There was a movie about you guys, the Germs movie.
Oh, God.
And in that, I'm so sorry to bring it up, but in that movie, Rodney on the Rocks, the impersonator of that movie, he played your song. Was that true, the whole, the way it played out? You guys were cussing on the radio?
Yeah, you can get that whole show on YouTube.
If I had a computer, how would I find it?
The Germs on Rodney on the Rock in 1979.
And it's unedited or what? How does that work?
It's edited a little. I mean, they edited most of the songs out, except the ones we were talking over and things.
What's the story of what happened with Rodney?
After that,
for our listeners, Rodney Bingenheimer is probably the biggest radio personality of all time. He, very much
he's
found.
Kind of small.
Is he? Well, whatever he is, he founded a lot of amazing. I mean, he
really
was the first to play a lot of amazing bands on the radio in LA.
Also,
and get them discovered.
He had Rodney's English Disco, which was the hub of the glam world in L.A.
That was a nightclub?
Yeah, everyone went there. I mean, David Bowie and Iggy would hang out there. Jimmy Page would hang out there. Alice Cooper, all the glam kids. And all the groupie girls, who, by the way, were not like these innocent children who were being groomed by these like mean and conniving rock stars. It was kind of the other way around. If anyone has ever been in the rock and roll world, they probably know that in the rock and roll world, including punk rock, the girls are the boys and the boys are the girls. The girls are the predators and the rock boys are the prey. And that's how it is. Those girls were smart, like Sable Starr and Laurie Maddox. They were 14, 15 years old, hanging out with Led Zeppelin and stuff, and all these guys, and Pamela DeBar, and they were brilliant girls. They were really a lot of fun, and they knew exactly what they wanted, and they went for it. And I had total respect for them, for all those groupie girls. It wasn't like people seemed to enjoy thinking it was.
The word groupie, there's like a negative connotation, but groupie was mean you're part of the group, right? That's
kind of, yeah.
I mean, in a way,
these groups, and they liked you, and you would hang out with them, and they'd hang out with you, and it was cool.
They want to be around the group.
Yeah, they were like the gods of our culture at that segment of it at that time, and these girls went straight to the jugular. There was a magazine called Star Magazine that came out in like 74, and they did 4 or 5 issues until people kind of shut them down because they canceled them, actually, because this magazine was showing 14-year-old girls how to be successful groupies. It's interesting. They're all online, all the issues. You can read it.
It's a different time. I mean, I was sort of I don't know what I could call it, but I guess an acquaintance of mine is BB Buell. I'm sure you know who BB is.
Oh, yeah. She was super cool.
Super cool. She's amazing. For those of us, just to tell our listeners, BB is Liv Tyler's mother, and she was married to Steven Tyler, and she was pretty much known, and in her own right, actually. She's a musician, too, and she's incredible.
She was Todd Rundgren's
a really good
girlfriend
musician.
For a while.
Todd Rundgren. She dated everybody. Rod Stewart. She went out with everybody. And she was basically known as probably the world's, biggest groupie of all time. But, she told me it was just a different time back then.
It was totally different, and that's just how people unless they really study it, they're not going to understand it because they're not there.
BB, if you're listening,
you have to be immersed
we
in
would
that
love
culture
we would love to have you on Living Legendary. BB, if you're listening, we love you. I think she's in New York now. So, Don, what do you think of LA now compared to how it was back when you were in your days of playing?
What I liked about LA is the people were smarter, weirder, more sarcastic, and younger by far than any other scene. Like the San Francisco and New York scenes. I mean, for instance, Deborah Harry was 33 before Blondie ever got on a stage. And here, like, say, my girlfriend that I started 45 Grave with, dying of cancer, she was 17, a Girl Scout and a high school graduate.
45 Grave, by the way, is one of the coolest bands. When I would go to goth clubs and everything, we'd always request your music.
Well, we did death rock. We started death rock. There's a book about it, and it has a picture of me on the front.
You, Christian Death, Sisters of Mercy. I think
I'm in the last picture of Roz. Like, he has a Hitler mustache, and I had a Fu Manchu mustache, and we were joking that day that if we kissed, we would have one big walrus leather guy mustache between us. And the next day, he hung himself.
Yeah, Roz Williams was the lead singer of Christian Death.
Christian Death, and I was actually in a band with a guy named Anthony, and he was roommates with Roz Williams. So I heard the whole thing about all of that.
Roz was a brilliant guy, and Rick Agnew,
Rick Agnew from Adolescence and from
great innovator on guitar.
Extremely. Anyone that wants to listen to Rick Agnew, Christian Death, The Adolescents, he's the melodic guitar player.
You know what's funny is when 45 Grave first, when we met the Christian Death people, they were opening for us in Pomona where Roz lived and they lived. And they had like army fatigues and short hair, and we're like there with our corpse paint and black lace and whatever. And then the next time we saw them, it was different. But we used to do lots of acid with those guys. We had Paul Cutler was a total acid guru, like the highest order, and we would all just do tons of acid. Robert Omelette, who was he was one of the weirdest, coolest people ever. But he would come over to our house with all these like crazed, super smart suburban kids from Orange County that were totally psychedelic, and we would just shift the amount of LSD and whipped cream. We got like these kids would bring their mom's credit cards, and then we'd go to the store and get all these large whipped cream cans, and then we'd huff the nitrous out of them.
Wow, Don. So
yeah,
I really want to ask about, well, actually, no, because it's a radio. I don't think we should ask about that. I was going to ask about, because nowadays we're seeing so many overdoses and stuff. And
yeah, well, fentanyl is 10 times stronger than heroin.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of overdoses then on the heroin.
Yeah, I would imagine you've seen a lot.
The only time I ever went out, like passed out, like nodded out, passed out, and woke up, luckily not dead, was because I got dope from Darby's dealer. He had a different heroin set than I did of people. And they went to this guy in West Hollywood, and my little heroin set went to a guy in Silver Lake. But Darby's dealer is the guy that introduced fentanyl into the heroin scene. But like I said, it was no accident. When Darby kicked me out of the band at one point because he couldn't kick Pat or Lorna out, and he wanted to get his boyfriend, sort of boyfriend, the Rob Henley, who was actually straight and quite a little gigolo.
Darby had a boyfriend?
Sort of. He tried.
So like Darby, you're saying Darby Crash was gay?
He wasn't gay. He was homosexual. He liked to stuff little skater boys, like 14-year-old skater boys. He hung out with Roz when Roz was 13.
Was this something that people knew, or was this
a lot of people did. Yeah, you read my book.
But I mean, was he out? Was he open about it himself? Did he like?
No. You couldn't be open about it. But everybody in a punk band in Hollywood, every punk band had someone that, if they weren't fully gay, they at least would sell their genitalia or at least rent it to people on Hollywood Boulevard to survive and make money. So every band had people doing gay things in it, and a lot of them had girls.
I would imagine in the punk scene in the early '80s and late '70s there would be a lot of homophobia.
Well, there started to be with the hardcore thing. That was 1980 when that started coming up. Nobody cared until then at all, and so Darby wanted to endear himself to his latest love, which was Rob Henley. And Rob Henley, you'd see him like cruising in a Ferrari with these beautiful Fiorucci-looking girls from Beverly Hills driving, and he'd be driving down Franklin in the car, and we'd be like, "Whoa, you go, Rob!" That's so hilarious. But he was straight. But Darby had that power; he could get the straight boys because they had to do it. He was Darby Crash, and they were like, "All right." But he couldn't kick Pat and Lorna out, so he kicked me out because we were both pretty crazy and weird and smart, but Darby wasn't really happy with the fact that I was in all these other bands. Like I played with Airway, an LA Free Music Society band, who Darby dismissed as hippie yacht noise.
It sounds like there was some animosity between you and Darby.
Not that much at all, but we would razz each other, but we really liked each other a lot because. Really, I didn't know too many people that smart. Pat was that smart, pretty much, but not as charismatic and, like cult leadery as Darby. He and Darby did amazing things. Like Paul Rossler from the Screamers said, if he did the ultimate Germs book, or the ultimate Darby Crash book, would probably end when the Germs started. So that was the interesting stuff. Acid Darby was about 1,000 times cooler than heroin and booze Darby.
Don, I have a quick question. So you guys all have interesting names: Pat Smear, Don Bolles.
Don Bolles is only interesting to me because I knew who it was.
Yeah, because of the mafia situation. But can you just, for our listeners, can you let us know how you guys all came up with these names? Because these are obviously stage names, but they're also your name.
Darby was Bobby Pin originally, and Lorna Doone, I mean, that was a cookie, Lorna Doone with an N. And Darby's mom, who was a real character, she named their previous drummer to Nicky B, Cliff Hanger. But I came up with all different names a lot, and Rob and I had a list of 200 band names, and people used them. We passed them around if people needed a band name. But one day, just for an example, like my Dinah Cancer, her name was Mary Bat Thing at the time. She was in a band called Castration Squad, and she was also in Vox Pop playing tambourine. And one day, 45 Grave was in Phoenix, getting ready to play a show, and we were watching TV. It was in the daytime. It was like 81, 82, and Dinah Shore had a program on in the day, and Iggy Pop was going to be on, so we were watching it. And Dinah Shore comes out, and she was red like a lobster, and it's like she looked like she was going to get skin lesions and stuff from her women's golf tournament that she spent the week at. And I'm like, whoa, she doesn't look like she's Dinah Shore. She looks more like she's Dinah Cancer. And then I'm like, hey, Mary, that's your new name. She's like, okay. And that was that.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of names. There's people that have these like quick, like you got to catch it right away.
Yeah, like Dale B. Sorry, our drummer.
How did you come with Don Bolles, and what's your real name?
Well, I don't even know my real name, but it's like Don Bolles was a reporter for both of the newspapers in Phoenix, the Arizona Republic and the Phoenix Gazette, and he was working on a story about land fraud, trying to protect the people from these, predators, the predatory criminals. And they set him up for a phony tip at this place, the Clarendon Hotel. He parked his Datsun, went upstairs, figured out this guy was bogus, went downstairs, started his car. The bomb that they had put under his seat went off and blew his legs off. And he lived for a few days and, long enough to name some names and point some fingers. And it went all the way up to the highest echelons of Arizona political and social life. And wow, it was a bigger thing than, I don't know if you knew about the OJ thing in LA. That was the biggest thing, and you couldn't go anywhere without hearing people talk about it. The Don Bolles thing was like that in Phoenix. There's like Don Bolles. You go to Denny's, Don Bolles at the next table, and he worked for both the newspapers, so he got a lot of press.
That sounds like you're putting a big red flag on your back by naming yourself after somebody that.
Well, it was irreverent, but I thought he was a hero. Personally, I still do. And but my band was getting interviewed on the radio on the hippie station KDKB, who finally figured out about punk rock in '77. And they're like, "Well, what is your name, sir?" And I said, "Don Bolles." And they're like, "Don Bolles? Any relation?" I'm like, "No, just a coincidence." Thing. Huh? Well, what's the name of your punk rock group? And I just said, "The Bloody Stumps." And then it got real quiet.
So whoever was in the know would be in the joke.
Yeah, and it was also like, bringing like a little memento from my previous Phoenix life to L.A. with me. And anyone that knew who Don Bolles was, I would know that they were either from Phoenix or had been there for during that time. So that was kind of interesting. But what a dumbass name, right? It's like, it's a great name, a great person. Blah, blah, blah.
I know you as Don. I know you as Don Bolles. I've known you for years now, and it's, hey, Don, how you doing, Don? I don't think about
Sparkle.
It. What is it?
My real name is Kitten Sparkle.
Kitten Sparkles. John, according to Wikipedia, it's not, but I don't know. I don't know if I should believe Wikipedia. And honestly, if you don't want to say your real name, we're not going to say it.
The Wikipedia is about me is kind of spotty. Some of the things are true, I'm sure, but I don't know who did that. But
I believe that people should be able to make up their own story. So
I do too. I don't call people by their slave names, as Muhammad Ali said when someone tried to call him Cassius Clay. He's like, that's my slave name.
Well, John,
it's good to choose our own names.
Pat Smear, he's in the Foo Fighters, Nirvana, we all know that, but he still carries that name, Pat. He hasn't strayed from the name.
Yeah, I figured out a good name the other night. I saw a movie that was amazing, by the way, and the name of the movie is what I want to have my name be in my next punk space rock band. It's Skip Tracer.
Skip Tracer.
Skip Tracer. Isn't that good?
I'd tune in to see what's up with Skip Tracer.
Well, Zolar X had weird names too, like Wygara.
I could see you like in and out of dimensions and like hanging out with aliens and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, Zolar X were pretty weird.
So Don, okay,
I like them.
I'm gonna just go into some crazy stuff because we're reaching the end, and I feel like the end should be wild. Let's talk about aliens. Do you believe in aliens or whatever you want to call it?
I don't think
extraterrestrial
have to be documented in order to be accepted as citizens.
So just give me like the Don Bolles, your UFO, UAP, your alien, your conspiracy vibe.
Well,
what do you got?
I believe that things can exist that shouldn't exist according to our mundane agreed upon worldviews, of course, but I don't necessarily know what those things really are, and I may never know.
So like the Nordic blondes and the grays.
There's so much stuff, and it can't all be untrue.
Imagine if they have like really good glam music in like Jupiter or something.
Well, they do. I mean, of course. Gas music from Jupiter is very popular.
For sure.
I mean, for sure, there's aliens. Give me a break. How self-centered is it to think that we are the only life in this vast universe of millions of galaxies and stuff? In fact, Don, I think...
And you know what else? We're just part of a giant life form that we will never understand even close to what it is. We're like the mitochondria in the intestines of some enormous creature of some sort,
I think,
and you can go infinitely outward or infinitely inward to the smallest subatomic particle waves, and there's so many universes either way.
I think you're an alien, Don.
Thank you. I would proudly.
Me too. I wish I was. Maybe I am.
If a band came down in a tour bus that was run off of some alien technology and they had a good music, would you join them? Would you go and tour the galaxy?
Well, I mean, that's how I've gotten into pretty much every band I've been in.
That's awesome.
It's about, except the germs, that ended up about the same.
You know what, Don? I'm just going to cut all the fluff that I'm talking about, but really, we spent a good amount of time. I had you out here in Palm Springs. You were DJing. And then afterwards, we came to the studio in which we're broadcasting now. But you showed me a bunch of unreleased music from your bands and other things you've done.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll just go and just say that, like, I wish I was recording our whole situation that we were hanging out with. All those songs that you played, that you produced, it's amazing. People know you from the germs and the things that you do. But you were playing some really cool pop-oriented, like, great music. And I'm like, geez, this is really good music. You told me, I know what I like. This is how I want it to sound. Yep. I was so impressed. Yep. All your music was so awesome. I wish I could do a whole show just on your music, Don.
I've got 4 really killer singles coming out that I produced or co-produced, and I play and sing stuff on them and wrote songs and co-wrote songs coming out this summer and spring.
The Fancy Space People and all that stuff you showed me?
Well, Fancy Space People has a whole album that needs to get finished, and if anyone wants to donate some recording gear, please let me know, because I could use some. But it's going to get finished this next year and a half. I've been slogging that around for 17 years. We lost our label, which was Billy Corgan and Terry Brown's label, and then they got in a fight, and the label stopped being a label, and then suddenly we were out of a thing, But it's a great band. It was the #1 live attraction in L.A. for a minute. Not that that's any kind of like indication of greatness, but in our case, it kind of was, and is. We still play sometimes, and it's not gone. We're just sort of on a little hiatus. Time is different, in Fancy Space. But now I'm in this group also called Hammered Satin. That's a junk shot glam style band, and it's blowing up right now. It's crazy. We just did this single, a song I wrote called Rock and Roll Angel, and a song Noah, our lead singer, wrote, who has been into junk shot glam since before almost anyone I know was in the 90s. No one really knew about that stuff. Go look it up if you don't know what it is, and you're going to be really pleasantly surprised if you like the Swede or T-Rex or Gary Glitter and the Susie Quattro, stuff like that, because it's good. There's this stuff to be like that, but wasn't as successful, but it was good.
You showed me that music, and I heard it, and I was like, how can I hear it again? You're like, you have to buy the 7-inch, or you have to buy the new release that's coming out, right?
Oh, yeah. It's coming out on Curation Records, which is a label run by a friend of mine named Matt and another guy named Brent Rademacher, and it's a good little label. And also I produced the Clark and the Himself the new single by Clark and the Himself. Clark and the Himself is a one trans band. Clark is a trans woman from Boise, Idaho, and she's super talented and like just killer smart. And she plays guitar, drums, and sings all at the same time in the shows, and it's really good. And has good songs too. But yeah, so I got that coming out. The 2 songs, both pretty good. And that's also on Curation. And then Lollipop Records, this is run by some friends of mine. And don't believe any of that canceling stuff with Lollipop. There was one shady character, but he's not involved anymore, really. But anyway, this band is called Astrologer, and they're from Phoenix. And I just went over to jam with them at Lollipop just for fun because they were my friends. And then I realized as I'm there and they're playing me their stuff, and that this guy is an incredible songwriter, and he is a great drummer, great bass player, guitar player. He does most of the music, and his what used to be his girlfriend, his wife Candy, is also an amazing singer and a presence. And then I'm just like, man, these songs are great. And so next thing I know, I'm in the band that's doing a lot of singing and producing. I produced the single Bang Bang Orangutan, which sounds a lot like Gary Glitter's song called I Didn't Know I Loved You Till I Saw You Rock and Roll. And the other side's called Green and Blue. It's about ecology. Still good.
I'm a big fan of Hammered Satin in your band. That's a cool name. It's hard to come up with a new, clever name that hasn't been used, and that's kind of cool. Hammered Satin.
Noah came up with that. Noah Wallace. He had a band in the 90s that was based on Milk and Cookies and this band called Kenny. From England, which is a whole other story. And but his band was called Teacher's Pet, and they wore matching pink jumpsuits and
that's a cool name.
Kind of pop music. And then he had this band called the Schoolgirls, S''COOL. But he had kind of bad luck with engineers telling him what to do, and they were wrong, and he was right. But he thought they knew better, and so he said, okay, he's a real easygoing guy, and he did what they said, but it turned out not to be smart. Luckily, he got me in the band, and I can talk to engineers.
I was going to say, I'm going to cut you off just for a quick moment, and only because I know exactly where you're going with this, and because we talk often.
We talk a lot.
Yeah, we call each other quite often. And one thing you says is this new album or this new single, the engineer, you showed them, hey, listen to this type of album or this 45.
Yep,
or this
he listened to Junk Shot Glam.
And this is what we're going for, fidelity-wise, stylistically. We're not going for Bruno Mars or top whatever. We're going for this sound, and this is what you have to. There's a certain frequency. It's a whole thing. It's like,
for instance, we cut like 30% of the low frequencies out to make it sound right. So it sounds different than other stuff. It sounds like the 70s that we never got to have here in America.
So, Don, with that, we're going to wrap up our show because we're reaching our hour mark.
Cool. I got to go watch my lovely lady friend Juliet Amoroso do a noise show at the Handbag Factory in a little while, and I got to take a bus. It's going to take a bit to get there.
Just to add another invite, you're going to, I hope, come out and DJ again in Palm Desert at the Hood Bar where you did last time. You played a bunch of great 45s. We loved it.
Yeah.
We're going to have you out.
Glam and Bubblegum are singles genre.
We're going to have you out again, and hopefully we can have you in studio, and then also people can tune into your own radio show where you're doing your Junk Shop Glam.
It's called Rebels Rule, and it's going to be on Quixie, the iVox radio.
2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours of Junk Shop Glam and Bubblegum.
I just want to say, Don, I absolutely adore you. I love you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for sharing these incredible stories with us.
Well, dirty job, but someone's got to do it.
I really appreciate your time. You spent at least an hour here with Sham and I, and we really appreciate it, Don, truly.
Those stories were incredible.
Yeah, well, I just made them all up right on the spot, so I'm glad you liked them.
Yeah, right. I don't believe
Oh, by the way, people can take misguided tours of the Punk Rock Museum with me. They just have to book them through the Punk Rock Museum people. And I've heard that these misguided tours are the bomb.
Where is
so
the
to
Punk
speak.
Rock Museum, and what is the Punk
That's
Rock
in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's in Las
Really?
Vegas, and Fat Mike put all of it together and did a great job. Pat Smear invested like a huge chunk of money, more money than I've ever made with everything I've ever done in my entire life. And he invested into the Punk Rock Museum. So did a number of other people. But Fat Mike had a good idea. I produced NoFX's first demo, right?
I didn't know that, but that's awesome. And just for the
Yeah,
listeners,
it's an accident.
there is a punk rock museum in Las Vegas, and it's curated by Fat Mike of NoFX. He put together multiple rooms with all these artifacts of all these punk bands. Just Google
There's
the
even
punk
a
rock.
jam room.
Yeah, the jam room where you can actually pick up instruments played by your favorites, mess around. There's a bar. There's merch.
Yeah, called the Triple Down.
Exactly. Monkey from the Addicts is touring. You're touring.
I watched some of his things, and his tours are pretty cool, too. I got some competition.
So, Don, again, we're reaching our time. We're going to do this again because this is not even enough time. We need like 30 hours.
It's a problem, right?
We need like another dimension to continue this conversation.
Yes, it's true. We need to be existing outside of the time and space continuum.
We're constrained by ones and zeros here.
This is digital,
Yeah, for
but
sure.
analog still sounds better.
We love tape. You and I both love analog. Okay, Don, goodbye. God bless. All the rest, Sham.
Thank you to all our listeners for tuning in to Living Legendary Podcast with Lady Sham, Baby Nigel, and our celebrity guest, Don Bolles.
Legendary guest, Don Bolles.
Meow meow for now.